Okay, great. Thank you all for joining. We have a pretty big crew today. My name is Duncan Leggett. I'll be facilitating the Paperless Parts demo with our customer Metal Tech Industries, who I'll have them introduce themselves in a second, as well as Brad from MIE Trak. So, a little bit about what we're going to cover in today's webinar session. First, I'll just start off with a quick background on the paperless parts expansion that we've made to Australia and New Zealand. Um, as well as some updated times that I'm actually traveling out there in the next couple weeks. Then I'll pass the mic off to Glenn and Nathan, who will introduce themselves, talk a little bit more about metal tech industry specifically, the history of MTI, why they went forward with paperless. And then for the majority of the session, we'll actually dive into a live demonstration where I'll show off the paperless parts technology. And then Brad will actually help me show off the live integration to MIE Trak Pro ERP as well. And so we'll talk about that exporting action as well as some importing action during the demo. We do have a a Q&A session at the end of today's webinar. So there should be a little button where you're able to submit questions into the Zoom call. So do that as we go along, and then we'll pull it up at the end and we'll go through and answer questions live. So anytime you have a question off the top of your head, make sure you write it down, plug it in there, and we'll make sure to come back to it. So without further ado, right, paperless parts has been, started in the United States, 8 or 9 years back now. We recently just made our official expansion to Australia and New Zealand after some pestering from Glenn and Nathan over here. But that went live in January of 2025. We've had quite a few different partners. Some of those are here on the left throughout Sydney and Brisbane and Melbourne. And then even more companies, but some like to keep it close to the chest because they see paperless parts as their secret weapon. So I do appreciate Glenn and Nathan showcasing their secret weapon to the audience here. Um, with that said, one of the biggest things that I've seen personally, as I've talked to more and more Australian and New Zealand sheet metal fabricators, is they usually get interested in paperless parts due to the fact that we are an estimating technology that can help a wide range of different parts, right? There's technology out there today that might help with laser cutting or nesting, but there seemed to be a lack of a software that could handle assemblies and weldments and machine parts and additive parts. And so the fact that paperless parts is configurable enough to handle a lot of different scenarios, that's usually where I've seen shops want to learn more about us. So with that said, I will personally actually be traveling out to Australia and New Zealand starting next week. So I leave Friday. I'm going to be traveling to some different cities. I'll come back to this page later, but if you're interested in having a real demo with your part files at your shop and me to come in and show you paperless parts with the team, I'm more than happy to stop by. Just shoot me an email and we can get something scheduled on the agenda here. And again, I'll come back to this page. I'll wait a second just so if people want to screenshot it or take a picture. And now, without further ado, the stars of the show, Glenn and Nathan, I'll let you guys take over this page and talk a little bit more about MTI in general.
Thanks, Duncan. Hello, everybody. It's a bit strange talking to a screen where you can't see everyone. Metal Tech Industries is in sunny Brisbane, in Australia. Lovely little place. We've been creating precision sheet metal components since 1968. It's always been a family business. We've had numerous years of changes. Anyone in this call would know what's gone on in the industry over the previous decades, especially the last 6 to 10 years. Our history was in transport, and we decided we needed to diversify, as many people have, which brings on its own internal issues to do with quoting and ERPs and factory flow and people and everything else that you could throw into the list. Duncan mentioned that he wanted us to talk about the moving ons for paperless, etc., but we did it in a different way. We actually changed our ERP first. Brad, so we moved to MIE Trak Pro a number of years ago because our ERP was 30 plus years old. And as a lot of you would know, the older systems become clunky. So we went down the ERP route, which took a little bit of time, but it was one of the best things we did. And as Duncan mentioned, Nathan specifically pestered Alan at Paperless over a year, probably 18 months, to get them to come and have a look at the bottom end of Australia and have a chat with us and let us look at their platform. Personally, Nathan looked over probably near on 2 dozen quoting platforms. We went and looked at a number of platforms live to actually see what they're all about, which was one of the best things we ever did. And us and our team settled on paperless. Settled is the wrong word, but paperless was the winner. And ever since then, it with its integration into MIE Trak has just transformed what we do on a daily basis. Nathan will speak more about that. But the platforms themselves haven't changed us from being a family sheet metal business. It's just allowed us to spread our wings and get into different sectors at a quicker pace and bring in more experience internally, which has been a fantastic experience. Nath?
Well, thanks, Glenn. My name's Nathan Hockey. I'm one of the directors at Metal Tech Industries. I've been in the industry for around 23, 24 years. I championed the MIE Trak and paperless integrations, along with some incredibly skilled co-workers. Glenn touched on the majority of the story, but what I can say is both platforms have been excellent for us, and it's really been game changing. So yeah, happy to share our experience and answer any questions that you may have.
Awesome. Cool. We'll get into the demo in just a minute. I think, Nathan, one thing that would be interesting would be talk a little bit more about like why even look for an estimating software. MyTrack has a quoting module within it that a lot of shops use Excel spreadsheets. Why were you even searching for potentially a software to integrate into your tech stack?
Yeah, so before Paperless Parts, we were using multiple platforms to quote. MyTrack was much better than the previous software we were using. However, we couldn't nest properly. We wanted to flatten step files and then nest from there. And it was just time consuming. It became a bottleneck within the business. And I stumbled upon a podcast called The Job Shop Show and listened to that, and then researched paperless parts online a little bit more. And it just seemed to be the solution that we were looking for. A lot of the time, that's not the case when you read into something, but to our surprise, paperless parts turned out to be that solution that we were looking for. Although it just took paperless parts a long time to let us be a customer. But one of the things I did like in that process was that paperless parts said no, and the reason why they said no, they said we're not ready yet, and that just said to me that they don't do anything half-assed. So, and that's true. So, yeah, that's why we moved to paperless.
I like that excuse. I'm going to start using that now when people ask why I didn't go to Australia earlier. It's because we don't. Cool. I guess before we move on, one thing, you guys have a case study with us on our website, right? And for folks that are listening, they can go on the website, they can type in Paperless Parts and Metal Tech on Google, they'd find the case study. In it, you mentioned a couple, I guess, value points of why you got or what you guys have experienced now that you use paperless. And I think that's a huge thing when I'm talking with shop owners and estimators is they're trying to think, is it worth the expense of adding an extra tool? Like I can do estimates today. I've been doing estimates for 30 years. I can use Excel. What is the benefits of moving into a system? I know in the article it mentions, something around how you guys have been driving more revenue because of quicker turnaround times, faster quoting. Can you talk a little bit about, you don't have to get too salesy, but just talk a little bit about some of the overall benefits you've seen from investing in a tool like this, just so the audience can understand how you guys kind of came to your decision and what you've seen?
Yeah, from a high level, just the volume of parts that we're getting through now compared to this time last year. I actually analyzed this yesterday. Last quarter, we quoted 170% more parts than we did the same time last year. That obviously turns into a huge uptick in your revenue and sales. So it's just been transformational. The estimators using the platform love using paperless. In fact, one of them said to me, I don't know what we'd do without it. And it's easier to collaborate between quotes. it's just it really is a great platform.
Yeah. Do you think one thing that's interesting, this one question on that is the idea of this uptick, the 170% extra quotes that you've seen. Obviously, maybe that's outside of your control. Maybe there's just more activity in the market. But do you also think that because you've been able with Paperless Parts to respond quicker to your clients, that they maybe are more likely to send you more quotes because they know you can handle it comparative to, if they send you a bunch of quotes, took you a week to respond, and maybe they're not going to overload you. But now because you're funneling them through faster, do you think that had anything to do with quote turnaround? I mean, the
Yeah,
quote volume experienced. I don't know
yeah,
if it has.
absolutely. From a customer service point of view, it's fantastic. I know our customers love it. The existing customers were sending more parts to us. New customers, we can turn quotes around so quickly now. So that first interaction with that new customer is a positive experience, which then leads to more RFQs, more quotes, and more orders.
Yeah, I think I just have some buddies. I study mechanical engineering at college. I have buddies now that have gone off and they become supply chain managers or buyers at different OEMs. And they mention all the time that's in the United States, we have different companies that offer like instant quotes or really quick quotes, but they're for really simple parts. And these folks that are buying complex parts will still always go back to those vendors because they're like, it's like Amazon. I can go on there. It's really quick and fast. I don't gotta wait a week just to get a price because they're also time sensitive, right? They need to go and make the product launch and they need quotes to get the parts in the door. So if you guys can provide that quick customer service of faster quotes, they're gonna come back to you if they're in a pinch. And I'm glad you've seen that. Let's stop talking high level and let's actually jump into the demo. So I'll take back the show. We'll jump into really where quotes generally start, which is an email box. Now, obviously, you can get quotes from a variety of mechanisms. I've heard sometimes people just get parts dropped off on their door. But let's assume in this scenario, it's in an email, right? We have a large email here from our buyer, Connor LaChapelle. We can assume he's from GE, right? General Electric. And he sent me a list of parts that he wants to quote, right? The part numbers, the quantities here on the left, and then he's attached some zip files. Now, inside your email, what you can do is you can actually forward this request off into Paperless Parts. So I'll have a specific email address tied to my Paperless Parts instance. I can click send, and that will actually shoot off an email into Paperless, which will help us start with the quote. Now, this usually replaces the need to take that email, open a bunch of files, try to figure out what you might be missing from your customer, start putting it on shared drives, open up different software like SolidWorks or CATIA or Creo to view all these files. Right, we're going to do a lot of that work for you in a moment as we jump into paperless. So I'm going to wait 30 seconds or so to see if that email comes across. Nathan, help me out here. How long does it usually take you for it to come across? Like a minute or two at most?
Yeah, within 30 seconds. Obviously, if there's a large package in there, it takes a little bit longer, but no longer than a minute. But this really does save a lot of time. It's almost magic to me, to be honest.
Yeah, what were you guys doing before if you got that email in? Was it the first step having to look through all those files, print stuff out? What
Yeah,
was
we just have a general quotes inbox, and the estimator would just have that email up and be cross-referencing the information, and then you'd manually have to transfer all the files into the internal server, whereas now it's all done automatically.
Yeah. So you'll see in a moment, there's going to be a little box that pops up here in the right-hand corner letting us know the new quote came across. Just because I don't want to waste a minute of everyone's time just looking at paperless, I already forwarded one in earlier, like an hour ago or so. So this is the quote that forwarded in, same exact email. Um, Everything you're about to see here, I have not touched yet, right? So the email came in. It automatically will actually read this email and populate it. So I click this link right here and I can actually see the email that came across. And so I can see, that's the email now that just came over, but I can see from here, right? I can now see the actual email. I can see who sent it to me, when they sent it to me, the parts and files that they sent over. And what Paperless Parts does, which is really nice, is it automatically fills out some of this information for me, right? So it looks to see, okay, Connor LaChapelle was the person that sent me the email. So I'm going to label this as the contact or the requester of the quote. Um, Connor Hughes on my team is the salesperson associated with Connor. So he got notified that a new quote came in. And we even are pulling out dates, right? The date in which I uploaded this email to Paperless, as well as the date in which the buyer sent me that email. So this is being read from that email and it's extracting it out. Now, because we're in Australia, I know you guys are looking at these dates and they don't make as much sense. There is an update that we've made for Metal Tech and for all Australian and New Zealand accounts where the date format is what you guys like and it's can be a metric, right? Today I'm going to show you the Americanized version because that's what I'm used to, but just know that that update is there, so you can thank Metal Tech for that as well. Um, But this is helpful when it comes to tracking, right? As Nathan mentioned a second ago, he was spent yesterday looking at increasing quote volume and things of that nature. Paperless has a whole entire analytical suite, which we'll get into. But the fact that Paperless can extract this information from the email and make it so your team doesn't need to manually plug this into a different Excel spreadsheet or a different CRM system just makes it so that data is hygienic and is valuable. So that way, when you're looking at analytics, you can start looking into things like how long it takes your team to turn around quotes, how many quotes have you done in X amount of time, and be able to actually trust that data because it's automated. As we scroll down here, we'll see the files came across. There's some zip files that were here. I can actually unzip the zip packages to reveal the files underneath. So when I click of the button, I'll come in here, I'll unzip these files. They'll start getting loaded into my account. You can see it's a mix of STEP and PDF, but we also support a variety of different files, whether it be SolidWorks, CATIA, Autodesk, Creo, um, you know, lots of different types of files that you can at least upload into Paperless. Each one is going to have different abilities, which we'll talk to in a moment. Now, as these files come loading in, the next step is setting up this quote package. So if I create my bulk create line items button, it's automatically going to look at that email and then create what part numbers and quantities were found within that email. So if your buyer was lucky enough to place that information in the email, this is where it would be. The other option is this is completely editable kind of interface, just like Excel. So if you do receive these large RFQ packages and maybe your buyer will send you an Excel spreadsheet, you can copy and paste from that Excel spreadsheet right here into Paperless Parts as well. So no matter how you get it, it should be pretty easy within a couple clicks of a button to create your part numbers. And then what's going to happen here is it's going to look across the files that came in and it's going to match up where they are best suited. So for example, if we look at line item number 10, we see the part number is 33000. That's what I'm supposed to quote. And we'll look across these files and try to find which files match with this line item. Now, obviously, in this case, the file name is the exact part number. But even if the file name is something different, where there's some garbage before or after it, it will still match it up. And in the case of a PDF or something that has the part number embedded in the actual file, the file name can be whatever it wants. And then our AI will actually read that PDF document or that TIFF document, and it will pull out the part number and then put it in the correct spot. So in a click of a button, it's going to assign these files to the correct spots. So that way I don't have to spend a bunch of time trying to figure out which files go where. It does it for me. I can see line number 10, if I click into it, has the step file, and it also brought over that PDF because it actually read the part number from a PDF. Now, I'm going to let Nathan and Glenn talk in just a moment here. But one thing to notice is if I go back to my quote page and I scroll down, a couple things just happened. First off, as I'm scrolling down, we can kind of see the actual thumbnail images of the part, which is huge because now I don't need to just click into a part number to view a file or go to my shared drive and try to view it. I can just quickly see, is this a sheet metal part? I don't got to remember part numbers as much anymore. The other thing that happens, which is really nice, is it extracts out information from also, again, a attached PDF or TIFF file. So if things like the revision and description are found within that bracket, it will open it up and populate it. We'll come back to the PDF AI stuff and I'll show you exactly how this is being extracted. But this helps with not needing to manually type in information time and time again. The only other thing I'll mention before I pass it off is the idea that if we don't have a file attached, it will show us that no file is viewable and that there's no file attached here, which is maybe an indication that the customer didn't send me everything I needed. So it's very quick to go from an email inbox into Paperless, building out your quote structure, and within a minute or two knowing, okay, I need to request this file because they didn't send me anything. I'll pause here. I guess, Nathan, Glenn, just from a quote setup perspective, before we get into actually building out our bombs and router steps, how has this helped your shop, I guess, gain some more speed, more accuracy? Tell me a little bit about how you guys have used this function.
Yeah, well, really, it's just a huge time saving. Um, it also eliminates a lot of errors. But yeah, but the main benefit is it just saves a lot of time.
Cool. Comparative to like having to just copy and paste
Yeah,
information from a
yeah.
file.
And it helps you get that quote back quicker to the customer.
Sure. The other thing that I don't know how often you guys use, but one thing that I do see time and time again is this idea of finding parts that are matching or similar. So in Paperless, we extract out, if you have a CAD model attached, hey, these are all the parts that have the exact same geometry, or in some cases, hey, this is a similar geometry. Maybe it's a rev change, a left hand versus right hand hook. Just helps with consistency on different part numbers. Have you guys used this functionality at all? Or yeah?
Yeah, that's a good point, Duncan. All the time. So you may have a quote package like this one, 10, 11 line items, and you've quoted it. The customers place the order. A month down the track, they send a revised quote package. Some parts may have changed, some may have not. Um, but what you can see there, you've got the exact geometric match. So that's just it's just another signal to say that, yep, that part hasn't changed. It might be just the color or something like that. Um, and then also there's the one down the bottom, similar geometries, which I use all the time. And it recognizes there might be just the addition of a hole or something like that. So you can cross-reference that previous quote with the new one and make sure your pricing's very similar.
Yeah, the last thing you would want, I hear sometimes shops wish they have this ability because before paperless, the only way they can remember if something is similar is using their old noggin. And they're like, I remember doing something similar like this at least a couple months ago. And sometimes they'll spend, you know, hours just looking for their ERP or looking for their shared files to try to find those parts that they quoted because they want to have a similar price. They don't want to deliver a price that's 40% different, or else the customer's gonna be like, what are you guys doing over there? So I'm glad you mentioned that. One thing I don't think you guys, maybe you're going to surprise me. I don't think you guys have this live in your account because technically it gets released Monday. I don't know if you guys were a part of the beta, but an interesting aspect of paperless parts is the idea that when we're pulling off, when you're quoting parts, obviously 3D models are important for grabbing geometries, but PDF prints are also, very important as well, in the sense that if I open up this example here, we can actually view the 3D model and any other files that you upload to Paperless Parts right here in our viewer screen. But I can also switch to the PDF drawing, and this is where we're grabbing information from this PDF. And one new thing that we've added to Paperless is the ability to actually extract key elements from a print that could be important when making costing decisions. So for example, you might have a 3D model of this part, but because of this GD&T, right? This perpendicularity control, that might completely throw off how you quote a part. Or maybe there's a tolerance on a hole that you can't hit with standard laser cutting or plasma, and you might need to machine it. So having this information before would require manually searching, and maybe you miss a spec or you miss these tight tolerances, and that could lead to downstream effects that are not beneficial. One thing we've done in Paperless is not only extract this information and make it really easy for estimators to understand it, but we've created this idea of requirements review where we can actually have different rules, where each shop can create their own rules based off of the GD&T or the text or whatever else might be within that PDF to create things like, if we go back to our main page, I can see all the requirements that came up. I can quickly see, okay, which parts contain anodizing based on what was in the print, or which parts have powder coating responsible. And so now I can quickly go through and find this information, even though this isn't coming from the model, this is coming from our PDF. Nathan, Glenn, I don't know if you've seen this, heard about it at all. Maybe I'm showing stuff that you guys don't know about yet.
Yeah, I saw a brief video on it, which I rang Nathan and went, "Oh, I like that idea." But personally, I haven't used it myself yet.
Cool. Can you guys talk, I guess, how important are PDFs? Like when you're doing your estimating process, I bet today you guys are searching for common lists of different gotchas, right? Do we have that material? Is there a weird spec? Do we have a vendor for this finishing? I'm assuming you guys have that process today where you're reviewing the print for estimating, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, a lot of the time, and that goes back to what Nathan was saying before about you don't miss I mean, you still have an opportunity to miss things. I mean, not everything in the world is perfect, but you go from missing clinch studs or small body clinch studs to other items or tolerances such as that because someone's eyes aren't as good. I mean, one of our ex-general managers used to have a very old school magnifying glass on his desk. That was his way of making sure he wasn't missing things. I mean, the world's moved on, and this is helping with that. So,
Oh yeah. I've had thinking about eyes. I was actually talking to one of our clients in the United States who's part of this beta, and one thing they mentioned was tapped holes sometimes aren't depicted in a model. They're always found on the print, whether that's a specification like M4 or M3 or just the word tapped. And this estimator is a little bit more older, and sometimes he has a magnifying glass where he prints out the print, then has the magnifying glass go across the prints and try to find anything like tapped holes or M4. So one thing that we've done inside of Paperless is now you can imagine, anytime these certain keywords appear in any print that you upload, we can create a search that says, okay, look at these texts, see if they occur in the prints that we've uploaded. And then if they do, automatically add in, maybe a CNC operation for our sheet metal part. So CNC steps, I think, right? And that's an indication that we need to add in that tapped hole, right? Or maybe I want to add a note, right? And that note is, add tapped holes. And then I'm going to assign this to my estimator, Alan, who is, the person we go to anytime we have a tricky part or we need to add in machining steps to sheet metal parts. You guys are laughing because Alan would never have any idea of how to quote these parts in reality. But anyways, that's kind of the idea of this feature. I think this is crucial because a lot of shops do sometimes only get PDFs. And so even if you don't have a model or a DXF, the ability to add some of these automation rules will start helping shops quote faster, even in those instances where they don't have all these different file types. All right, let's go to some of the fun stuff. I'm going to do two things. First, I'm going to show building the router, right, for a part, and then going into an assembly and showing that. So inside of Paperless Parts, this whole setup, if we aren't spending 20 minutes talking about it, should only take you 2 minutes or so. You have your parts list, you're going through, now you want to quote these parts. You can do this in bulk fashion by coming here to the left of the screen and selecting parts that you want to assign a particular process to, or you can just click into an individual part and select a process there. A process is basically just a way to categorize parts, I would say. So in my account, I have a process called OEM sheet metal. I come in here, I select my material, I select my process, I click go ahead. Paperless parts will now, based on the rules that we create with the team. So when Metal Tech came to us, we sit down with Metal Tech, we sit down with every single one of our customers, we build these rules that are specific to their business, right? For their machines, their way of thinking, all that. And we create a way where paperless parts will help build some router steps. So for example, in my operation, it looks at the part, and anytime there's a bend that's detected, it automatically adds a press brake operation. In this case, it added a robotic press brake because my rule said if the bends are less than, half a meter, throw it on our smaller press brake. Or if I could create a rule that says if it's over 50 kilograms, throw it on our larger press brake or double the labor rate. So these different rules that you can create inside of paperless that go beyond just laser cutting. Again, I think that's one of the things you mentioned, Nathan, in the past is there's a lot of software out there that has this rule-based mechanism where you can upload a model or DXF and it gives you laser times. But one thing that attracted to paperless was the ability for us to do this, not just for laser, but for CNC and for press brake and helping out with welding and things of that nature. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about that as well while we're on this topic here.
Yeah, because we do a lot of fabrication because we're a full service fabrication sheet metal company. As soon as you get past the laser cutting and bending, you might want to do the part might have some hardware insertion. It might have, many parts coming together into fabrication, which require welding, grinding. And you can configure templates for all those processes all the way through to dispatch. And that's just, helped us streamline and standardize all of our quoting times. But I will say it is worthwhile to spend a lot of time prior to implementation if you go that way, to really think about and do some time studies on all those operations to get the most accurate result.
Yeah, garbage in is garbage out for sure. Do you feel like with that, a lot of folks that I talk to, sometimes just the idea of creating these rules or thinking about, how do I, maybe they can explain it out loud, but to create logic and programming rules is a bit hard. Do you feel like our team helps with that at all? Like thinking
Yep.
of Miles and some of the folks that you worked with on our team, like how is our onboarding team helping? Are they a bunch of button pushers, or how do they, I guess, help you out with the creation of these rules?
I mean, we're sheet metal workers. We're not the brightest sparks. Let's be honest. And yeah, your team helped massively on the mathematics side. Yeah, we had Miles as an implementation specialist, and I remember we sat together and tried to develop a powder coating algorithm. And without Miles, we wouldn't have got the result that we've achieved. It's it's fantastic, and that's where I see you guys different compared to some of your competitors. And it's not BS.
Yeah, I know, and that's the hardest thing for me to showcase when I'm talking to folks too, is like sometimes they're like, I want to spend, the next 6 months trying to figure out the formulas on my own before I implement paperless. And I'm like, well, that's part of the reason why our team's there is we've done this 800 times, right? We have a lot of clients in the States. Fabrication over there is similar to fabrication in Australia, same mathematics, same rules. So I do think that's a very big value benefit that a lot of it's hard to demo that. I can't demo Miles. I wish he was here and you guys could see his beard and stuff, but
No.
it's
I'll
hard to
just
do.
jump in there, Duncan. I just want to say one point on that to do with the rules. Yes, Paperless has done it however many times, but there was never once, and we never asked for it, but there was never once where we were shown or given a rule version from somebody else out there. We had to put in the information and talk about it to come up with it. It wasn't just I want to do this. Oh, well, we did this 2 weeks ago for Joe Blow down the road, and here's the rule. Well, no, that doesn't happen. So, which gave us even more confidence in what we were doing.
Yeah, your pricing rules are your pricing rules, right? We take
Yeah.
that level of security very, very deeply here at Paperless. So, I mean, there's obviously some things that are well known, right? We know what a laser cutter is, we know what a press brake machine is, but when it comes to those specific costing rules, yeah, you're gonna work with us to develop those, and we're not gonna just give away your secret sauces. With that said, just so the team some of the viewers understand what we're looking at here, right? Each one of these is a router step that actually can be programmed to come in from MyTrack, right? So the work centers that you see here would be the work centers that exist in MyTrack. So that way, when we push this over to MyTrack, that information flows, which we'll get to in just a moment. The other important aspect is these don't have to be just work centers. These could also be warnings. So each one of this one, for example, tells me there's a W bend warning because as we open up this model in a second, we'll notice that one of those bends is not something that is easy to work on. So I wanted in my shop a notification to be alerted to my team saying, hey, check out this W bend a bit deeper. Outside of that, each one of these work centers, as we were talking about, has a calculator attached. It has a formula, right? So obviously, if I open up the press brake one, this is a very basic formula that says, okay, there's 8 bends. They each have the same radius. There's 4 flips based on the different bend directions. And we have, something that says, okay, it's 15 seconds per bend in a situation like this. So 15 times 8 gives us a runtime of 2 minutes. You guys, folks on the screen, you guys can have other rules, right? I'm sure Glenn and Nathan have different rules for forming as well. We've seen some shops where, based on the size of the part, right? If it hits a certain diameter or hits a certain length, automatically add in an extra labor rate for the extra person that's going to handle that part, or double the time it takes to press break the part. Right? There's these different rules. We can get very fancy with them. You can even have different rules for bends versus hems versus offsets, right? They're all technically different features. So how this information is getting automated is if we go into the model real quick, we can actually see that inside of paperless parts, we have this ability to extract out this information. So the bends, what's the angle on the bends, the radius, the length of the bends, right? And again, this is available in metric too. And then using this information, these are the inputs that you can use to drive your rules. Um, One thing I'll also call out is again, unlike other tools that might just stop at laser cutting, right? We go very deep into our interrogation. So we're extracting out different warnings that are supposed to help, just like our conversation about PDFs earlier. But these warnings where if there's something funky about a part, we'll highlight it for you. So you can create different thresholds for these, so that way they're not always showing if you don't want to. Again, it's one of those things that's up to your shop to give us those thresholds so we know when to show a warning versus when not to. But some of these warnings are like W bends that might require an individual to come in here and look deeply at because it's not going to be just 15 seconds per bend here. It might require special tooling. Or there could be a hole next to a bend that could get deformed as you're forming. So that's another warning that could pop up. And when these warnings do pop up, you will have the ability to highlight them and start chatting with your team, right? So I'll tag in Alan again and ask, do we need special tooling? And now Alan will be able to quickly, in an email, he'll get an email saying, Duncan chatted with him in Paperless. He clicks it, brings him to this part. He can look across this part, look across the PDF that's attached, start highlighting different things, and respond back to me. I'm assuming Nathan and Glenn, you might have some experience maybe with this. I would love to learn about some of the key, or I guess more frequent uses that you guys do with collaboration. I don't know if that's between estimators, shop floor and estimating. Curious to hear from you guys.
I
Yeah.
I use it all the time if I'm in paperless, and I'll be honest with everyone on the call, I'm not in there every day. I might not be in paperless for a month, but I pick it back up very quickly. But I'll have a question and I'll just ping like that, tag Nathan or one of our estimators who I know is working. And within a couple of seconds, they've had a look. You don't have to wait, or you can, and you get your answer back, you move on. But the other point is, if it's something that might be more complicated, you can move on to your next part in your quote, and it sits there waiting for you to come back to. You're not paper trailing it. You know that it shows you the part isn't finished yet. The conversation is there when you go into it. When the person opens up that message, it opens it up at that part, at that section that you were looking at. So it just makes it a lot easier to work on the fly, or to be able to move on and not have to wait because somebody's gone to the toilet or gone out for a smoke or something like that.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah. And I'd say the most commonly, we use this most commonly for feasibility. So if there's like a difficult bend, we might tag the bending team to have a look at that so they can simulate it through our bending software, or the welding team if we're unsure while estimating what something may mean or how long something may take. So real world, I'd say, yeah, feasibility is the number one use for this.
Sure. Yeah, and it's really beneficial because over time you'll have all these notes attached to this part. If you need to requote it, if you're looking at it once you win the order 3 months down the road, it's very clear. Hey, I asked you if you needed special tooling. You guys said no. Don't get angry at me in sales, right? The engineering team told me we didn't need special tooling. So it's a nice way to hold people accountable too, which helps drive some change. With that said, let's keep on moving here. I want to get into an assembly. I will note there's nesting inside of paperless. So for material, there is ways where you can nest sheets and get actual nests. Some folks like to do rectangular nesting. Others like to use paperless. This is a rectangular part, but if it was moon shaped, you could have it rotate different angles and degrees. And you can even make it, if it's stainless, lock it in a certain direction for bending. But there's a lot of functionality there, and there's plenty of videos on our website that talk about nesting. We might be able to get into it as we look into this assembly. But with this assembly, I think there's two things. First is if you get a 3D model of an assembly, one of the big benefits of paperless is we also help to extract out the bill of material very, very quickly. So I can actually come in here and it will automatically break apart my bill of material. So I can imagine building this in any ERP system, not even, MIE Trak, but anywhere would take quite a while to plug in these part numbers and the revisions and the descriptions and fill out all this information line item by line item and then build it out. But in paperless, it's a click of a button to upload the file and bam, now you have the assembly structure built. This also works on PDFs as well, right? We had some releases. I don't want to show that right now just because of time, but more than happy. We have videos on our website where if you upload PDF drawings, right, and there's the bill of materials somewhere on that PDF, we'll be able to extract it out and build it here. I don't know, Nathan and Glenn, if you've had experience building some of those bombs from PDFs or not. But just bond building in general, I'm assuming if you got, a 30, 20 component assembly, how long would that have taken you just to build that structure before paperless parts? I would love to learn a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think everyone on the call can relate how long a large assembly can take manually inputting every part number and material piece of hardware. The bomb builder for PDFs is just saves a huge chunk of time of just boring admin. You do still have to review it to make sure everything's correct. However, it is such a nice tool after having struggled for so many years to use and helps you save a lot of time.
Like, what is like this is usually a big value add for a lot of shops that I deal with in the States as well. If you did get, let's say a 50 component assembly that had a tree structure like this, how much faster do you think you're building it in paperless versus, the old way of doing it? What is that difference? Is it 10% faster, 50, 70? What do you say on a guess, I guess, Nathan?
Ah, 2 to 3 times faster. It's a hard question to answer. It's on case by case, but it is so much faster for a large assembly in particular. I remember I had one with over 150 parts, and it took me 3 weeks once just trying to source all the hardware and things like that. And yeah, and paperless can speed that up, well within a week for sure.
Oh, I can imagine. I've had some customers say that they didn't even quote large assemblies. There's one customer in Iowa that in the States that mentioned that they had a 300 component assembly. Anytime they got RFQs like that, they wouldn't quote it because it would take, one full-time person a week and a half, 2 weeks to build that all out. But now with paperless, they've been able to start quoting those parts within a few days. And so they've opened up a whole entire new revenue stream because now they can quote the work. While before this, it wasn't worth it, especially when you know you're not going to win, right? It's easy to say, yeah, I'll quote this 400 component assembly when you know you're going to win it. But if you don't know, and it's like, 3 out of a 30% chance, some people aren't going to roll the dice there and waste all that time. So build up the assembly structure. You can do this again with a model, PDF. If you're doubting me on the PDF, send me your PDF guys, and I'll do a custom demo with you, and I'll show you how we can do it with both um, for those listening. But after you've built this, you can also look across these different I guess, manufacture components. And it's really easy to come into here and actually do what I did for that single component earlier, which is just create our process. So in this case, I'll do a laser cutting for my track. We'll do 5052 aluminum. And there's a couple things I want to show, right? Right there, it's going to now quote all these parts individually by looking at the information we have for these parts and generating our routers and our costs like you've seen before. The other thing I can do is I can quickly select my purchase components and actually convert them to purchase components. I can do this either here, oops, or in our BOM builder. So if I go back to our BOM, right? I assign certain individuals as purchase components. I can convert them over. You can see this is actually in my fake environment pulling information from MyTrack. So if you have this connection to your MyTrack ERP system, we're actually importing data, right? We are importing the router steps with the work center labor rates and the burden rates for those work centers, but also purchase component library. So it's easy to look up parts and actually find them within your MyTrack database to convert those over to purchase components, which is, again, pretty helpful. Now, outside of this, the other interesting aspects about BOM editing is you can also this quickly, if I needed to move these under a different layer and change my BOM structure, I can do that pretty easily inside of paperless. Now, I'm just going to delete that draft real quick. As we go to quoting these parts, I select my process. I can come in, I can see I have pricing. If I look at a particular part, it's going to, again, do what we've seen before, which is build those router steps for me, right? It brings in my MyTrack routers. In this case, it actually brought in a CNC step because there was a countersink on this part. So it added in operation for countersinking. I didn't even need to look at the file. It let me know that there was a countersink there, and that's why we added the CNC step. But the other interesting aspect is materials. So in my track, this was actually the material, the sheet that we grabbed. So we're also bringing over your material database, right? We're looking at the parts thickness and the material type that we selected. And then these are the sheets that could be available for that part. It did a quick rectangular nest and picked the one that had the most optimal yield. So that is something you can set up in MIE Trak. Again, there's always a scoping that we do because everyone uses their MIE Trak instance different. Some people have different data in there, but this is one of the standard things that we can do in your account as well, is bring this information over from your MIE Trak database into Paperless at the time of quote. Now let's move over to actually sending this information to MIE Trak. So we've quoted a couple parts, we've built the costing structure. I can scroll down, I can actually see our costing structure for this entire assembly in different categories. I can see it at each individual component level as well. And this is where I can start adding in my pricing, like my, general margins or my customer specific markups. Everyone has those, PITA charges or the pain in the ass charges for different customers. So you can have, different rates and different markups and margins by the customer or by the material. And you can add your pricing in here, add your tooling cost or your NRE charges, and then your quote's ready to be sent. So I'm going to quickly go through the quote send process. But what you'll be able to do is in Paperless, you can finalize your quote. It's going to draft up a bunch of errors for me because I'm not actually done quoting this part. But once I am, I would be able to select a certain email template. So I could say, okay, this is a new customer I'm sending a quote to. It's going to draft up an email for me, and I can quickly send quote. When I send that quote out, what's going to happen is that individual is going to receive an email from me. It's not going to look like it's from Paperless. It's going to look like whoever's sending it. And it's going to be an email that contains the information I placed in it. And it can either have a PDF quote or a digital quote. A digital quote will just be a link in the email. Your buyer clicks on it. They can see your logo up here, your information, and they'll be able to see the different quantities and the pricing that you offered with the lead times. I don't know, Nathan and Glenn, do you guys offer expedites on parts? Have you played around with that functionality a little bit?
Yes.
Yeah. So like one of the things that you can do in paperless is you can have the same quantity break, different lead times, and offer different pricing, which Nathan, you can talk a little bit more about high level philosophy of why you would even offer that to your customers, right?
Oh yeah, we might have a large customer who's in a pickle for whatever reason, and they need, a couple of parts laser cut tomorrow. The schedule's pretty full, so we have to work some overtime. So yeah, we offer them an expedited lead time, and it's up to you whether or not you want to charge more for that. Completely at your discretion, but we've seen that work really well for the customer because they get what they want, and we're able to help them out.
100%. When this quote gets sent, this is one method of sending. You can also create an Excel export and then send that to your customer if you need to send it out in a certain fashion. I've seen some buyers and OEMs require a quote to look in a certain format, so you can do that inside of Paperless as well. Once the quote is sent, it will be sent off to our quote folder. So you'll have a bunch of different example quotes. If we're looking at here, we're looking at Andy's quotes that were created in the last 90 days. These are just different dashboards you'll have. I won't spend much time here, but this is where you can start filtering down by, hey, I want to look at all my quotes that are assemblies, or look at all my quotes for a certain buyer, or all my quotes where we're waiting for material pricing. And it's just easier to kind of maintain those views. I don't know, Nathan, if you have any views or different ways that you like to view this sort of information in paperless parts here.
Yeah, I think every one of our estimators has their own view. We have a communal dashboards, but it's quite easy to configure them.
Yeah, you can kind of, again, filter by anything, filter by the specific contact or the specific buyer, filter by the process, or the date that it was due, the date that it was viewed too, right? In certain aspects of paperless parts, when you send out a quote, it gets labeled as an outstanding quote, and you can come back and see if they're clicking on those quotes that you sent out, which could be very helpful when it comes to, hey, I sent a quote out 3 weeks ago and someone's just looking at my quote now. Maybe I should follow up with them. Let me quickly send a quote.
Yeah, that's one really good use for this is quote follow-ups. It makes it very, very simple for you to follow up on a quote that you've sent out.
Now, want to make sure we're getting to the MIE Trak portion of the exports. So I'm going to actually jump back into my quote. So one thing I can do is when I'm ready, let's say I sent out the quote, it gets marked as sent, then if they submit a PO through Paperless, this will happen automatically. But if they sent me a PO, just an email, I take that PDF, I download it, I can go to facilitate order. And this is where I'm going to push all the hard work I did in Paperless Parts into my track. So I'm going to come in here. Let's say they only bought this assembly. I'll be able to select what they bought, create my order, plug in my purchase order number, upload the purchase order if I wish, right? Select which facility it's sent from if I have multiple facilities in Paperless Parts. Again, same thing with the ship to and build to facilities if I have multiple. And then I can kind of come in here and complete the order. When I complete the order, that's going to trigger an integration over into my track. Again, I submitted an order into my track like an hour or so ago, but Glenn, Nathan, how long does it usually take to get into my track? Let's say it's, a quote that has like 10 different line items. There's a couple of sub-onlys on there. How long would it take to show up in my track?
Less than 30 seconds.
Yeah. So when that happens, my session was disconnected. So give me one sec as I just log back in here real quick. Gotta log into my track database. I guess when I'm doing this, maybe Glenn and Nathan, if you want to talk briefly about just high level, the value of the MyTrack integration, that'd be great. And then I'll show it here in a second. Like what you guys gain from having it exported into MyTrack at the time of order.
But excuse me. One's the speed, obviously, because you're building your router outside of the ERP. So as you just showed, how quick it is to build your routers and build your bombs. So that just flows straight in. So you're not spending the time you would have been creating that, and you're not doubling up. And then realistically, instead of having to plug everything away and create the order inside your ERP, it's already there. It becomes a standard rule process of checking to make sure something wasn't missed either by your customer or your estimator. If anything's out of whack, a miscommunication between what the purchase order was and what was actually sent across because it got missed by humans. For me, the time saving is in that side and less errors.
Yeah, it's very quick, it's very easy. But the integration it's a two-way street. So you've got all your information that's in MyTrack is in Paperless and vice versa. If you win a new customer, you don't have to spend the time double entering that new customer into MyTrack. It's already there. It's pushed over, as I think Brad may show you. So it's relatively seamless. It's good.
Yeah, I'm going to start with two things. And Brad, this is where I'll have you jump in. First is going to be the sales order. So I'm going to come into here, select my sales order. I can see this is the one that I sent over. So this is the first, I guess, sales order page. I guess, Brad, you could talk a little bit about what's on the screen here, what got pushed over from Paperless Parts.
Yeah, so there's really kind of four things that come through with the integration that are particularly important when it comes to the integration with Paperless Parts. One, when that order gets through, if this customer profile does not exist, we're going to create that through that integration on the fly. So that, like Glenn was pointing out there, that you don't have to go back and manually key that stuff in. This is also going to be the case if maybe there's a new contact or maybe it's a new shipping address. We're going to capture that information. So again, we don't want you to have to go back and manually key that information in. So two, what happens inside of MIE Trak Pro once that sales order is actually generated or created is you're essentially booking the order. And you're also driving demand for that product. And so depending on your company, how you satisfy that demand, that kind of opens up a couple different pathways through the rest of the ERP. Three, what's happening in the background here is going to be creating a router. Now, this is truly a seamless and complete integration in the sense that we're not just bringing in bill of material information, we're also bringing in that routing information from that quote. So it's a complete picture. In fact, when I'm training on routers inside of MIE Trak Pro, I usually refer to them as the recipe on how I intend to manufacture a part. And so you're getting that full picture. Lastly, any kind of documents that you might have in that process, those things are going to flow through. And so that we have that information also on the production side and purchasing side inside of the system as well.
Yeah, I think again, I'm a novice in my track. I don't use my track every day, if you can imagine, working at Paperless. But um, as Brad was mentioning, here on the left-hand side of the screen, I sent over that one part, that assembly we were looking at the end of Paperless. It brought over the bill of material, and then for each one of those components that is manufactured, it's also showing us the work center steps that I've come across. I think I can even come into here. Yep, and it's going to show me. It also brought over the times, right? So those router step times, the setup times, the run times, all that information is populated. So when you win an order, you can go from, okay, I received the PO to now this assembly structure, this 50 component, this 100 component assembly is inside of my ERP instance. It has the work centers attached. Obviously there's going to be a due diligence step of engineering going through and reviewing and maybe changing some machines out based off of capacity. But now you're not starting from scratch. You're not spending, a week or a bunch of time plugging this information in manually. It's already in paperless. It should fire over to my track just fine as well. So this is a huge piece of value that, if we didn't have this integration, we didn't have this partnership with MyTrack, I think the paperless parts system would be less valuable, and any system that doesn't connect to your ERP would be frankly less valuable because you just have to redo all the work in your ERP when you win the order. I don't know anything else, Brad or Glenn or Nathan, that you would want to touch upon when it comes to the MyTrack side.
Yeah, I'd like to highlight one thing that the viewers may be thinking. Within MyTrack, you need to associate your bill of material with an operation. Now that is automated through the integration. So your sheet will be consumed at the laser. If you have a clinch stud, it'll be consumed at your hardware insertion operation. So that saves a heap of time as well.
Yeah, again, we do a whole scoping and during the process before you sign up with Paperless Parts to ensure we're going to integrate correctly into your instance of MyTrack. And then during the evaluation or during the implementation process, we have a team dedicated to making sure this works. Because again, different shops have different requirements. Everyone does things differently in their ERP. We want to take that to note and make sure that we're driving this to make it work for you. With that said, I'm going to pause here. I think we covered everything we wanted to. Thanks for staying on the line. We are about an hour in. We're going to do Q&A if there are any questions. I'll just pull up the slide deck in the meantime here. So let me quickly get to some Q&A. I'll also share my screen. For Q&A, I'll leave this up as well, just in case people want to note when I'm going to be around. Again, biggest thing I can say is if you want to look into Paperless Parts further, if you want to learn more about MyTrack, you can email me. I can funnel questions to the MyTrack team, but I also am more than happy to stop by your facility in person with your part files and run through a more specific demo with all the questions you might have. I guess looking at some of the questions here. One is Paperless Parts compliant with NIST 800-171/CMMC requirements? And the answer is yes. That's one thing we spent a heck of a lot of money on and has been talking about for years now. But we can send you information on that. We've been, we're all set. About a third of our base in the United States is aerospace and defense customers that are looking to, become CMMC certified, especially now that that's rolling out in contracts. I think this month or so. So yeah, I'm not the expert on CMMC, but we have team members that are, and we have plenty of resources I can send you, David, so I will. I think I have some more questions. Is Paperless Parts online only, or is there a desktop version? Paperless Parts is only online, so there is only, access it through the cloud. There is no on-premise version. Even with that, again, we maintain pretty good security, especially with that CMMC. Does Paperless Parts integrate with ECI's M1 ERP? Yes. So we operate in a similar mechanism as you saw with the MyTrack integration. We do a similar approach for the M1 ERP. We actually have a strategic partnership with ECI, who owns M1. So we integrate with all their line of products, Job Boss Squared, Job Boss, M1. There's probably a few that I'm forgetting to mention there too. Outside of M1 and iTrack, we do these integrations with, I think we have 40 different integrations. We see maybe 10 that appear time and time again. But yeah, I'm more than happy to answer any specific questions about that one if you send me an email. Another question. Confirming you can export out the items you need pricing from suppliers. Send to suppliers once they fill in an Excel spreadsheet. It could be imported directly into Paperless Parts. Um, Let me, I guess, ask Nathan and Glenn that. How are you guys dealing with outside? Like, I know in paperless parts, for example, if you have some parts that are supposed to be sent externally, there's a few different ways. There's the external chat in our system, or you can generate a custom Excel export that pumps data into a spreadsheet that you can send off to your customers when you fill it back into paperless manually. How are you guys doing that today?
That would be done through MyTrack. So you'd update the pricing in MyTrack, and then through the integration, the pricing from MyTrack is updated in Paperless Parts.
Do you let's say you go out for like a powder coat operation or some operation you do outside the house, would you take that RFQ you received and keep that in paperless parts, or would you keep that in MyTrack, like that document?
We keep that in Paperless.
Okay, yeah.
Yep.
That is one thing that our customers do. It depends on the customer. Everyone's a little bit there, but just a way to keep track of all the quotes associated with the end quote. Let's see. Answer live. We'll wait a little bit longer too in case people have other questions. I know we have like about 30 or 40 people on the line here. So I'll give everyone else 30 seconds, but if not, we'll move on. Oh, I saw an ITAR click button. Can you explain that in further detail? Yes. I'm surprised by how many ITAR and CMMC questions, given that this is mostly Australia. I guess I need to catch up on my ITAR understandings. But yeah, in paperless parts, there is a way where you can select if a certain line item is ITAR. If that's the case, that is our way to indicate that there's CUI information associated with that line item and associated with that quote. So there's certain actions and things that, when you send a quote out to your customer, for example, if one of those is marked as ITAR, we wouldn't show a thumbnail image of the part in the quote because that would be a violation of the, rules of ITAR. So that's like one example. Another way is, for example, in CMMC, one of the things that you'll need to prove to your auditors is you have a way to showcase who has viewed CUI information and when they viewed it and if they've downloaded anything out of the system. So in paperless parts, we can actually show you a log of all the time users have viewed or downloaded information from paperless parts that contain CUI data. That one way of doing that would be, making sure that your team is selecting those buttons, right? We don't automatically select if something is CUI. We actually, in part of our AI tool, will say, hey, this part contains information that could be CUI, right? We have that warning show up, but it's up to your team to be the ones that click, this is CUI, just like you would in any other system. The frame of implementation for paperless parts. Nathan and Glenn, I'll let you. My short answer is it really depends on the shop. I've seen some shops get up and running in a few weeks. I've seen other shops take 4 months. It really depends on the specific type of customer you are and where you are in your journey. But generally, the 3 month mark is where you have, paperless parts at a point where you can be quoting out of and you have the integration done. It's usually 3 months, and maybe you're doing a couple meetings each week during that 3 month period, maybe 2 or 3 hours of meetings a week. I don't know, Nathan or Glenn, if that's semi-accurate to what you guys experience.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Ours was approximately 3 months. My advice would be is not to rush it and really think about your whole process workflow, which Paperless will help you with, and then spend times on developing your processes and your time studies and things like that. So you've got one chance to get this done correctly from the start. You can modify down the line, but I think it helps to prepare at the beginning.
For sure. And again, we can help with some of that preparation as well. That's why our team's there, frankly. That's why you guys pay an onboarding fee. With that said, I'll do a couple more and then we'll call it for today. Can paperless parts show a price breakdown? I'm assuming that's a price. The answer is yes. There's different ways. We can do it in the app where we can show you, okay, for this assembly or for this part, here's the, total price associated or total cost associated with material or the total cost associated with inside labor or total cost associated with welding. We can do that in the app. Some folks also elect to do that out of the app. So there's a way where we can export that information into Excel. The reason why we do that is sometimes people like to take that data and then manipulate it in some way. So the answer is we can do it. It just depends on what your use case is for those price breakdowns. I will also note, I won't mention any specific OEMs or buyers, but there are a ton that I deal with, or my customers that require, hey, here's a spreadsheet. When you deliver your quote, I want it broken down in this particular way. Any sort of format you give us, we can export the data from paperless into some sort of Excel spreadsheet. So there's a ton of value in those exports. Excel's a great tool, and no matter how long any other software comes around, people will still use Excel in some sort of fashion. So we're there to make it easier for you to get that data out of paperless into Excel or any other tool. I don't know, Nathan and Glenn, if you guys have any Excel exports you guys use. Probably, I would say them a couple, maybe.
To be honest, we've only used it a few times. It's not something that happens commonly.
Yeah. All right. That's the last one I'm going to do for the day. If there's any others, you guys are more than happy to email me. Again, we're here to answer any questions. But we want to thank, first off, Brad, thank you for joining from the MIE Trak side and kind of talking a little bit more about the integration. And obviously, Nathan and Glenn, you guys have been great. I appreciate you guys spending the last hour with me talking about your use of paperless. If there's any questions for you guys, I'm assuming you're more than willing to answer questions, but how should folks reach out to you? Just email, reach out to me, and I'll intro to you. What would be best?
Yeah.
Email's the best. I mean, they can go through you, Duncan, if you wish, or it can be direct. There's not a problem. Our email's direct. There's just our names in front of @metaltech.com.au. It's not hard.
There we go. All right, guys. Well, cool. Hopefully we can all meet up when I'm in Australia in a couple of weeks, and we'll grab some brews and have a good time. So if you want to join in the party, let me know. But until then, thanks everyone for staying around.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you guys.